scripture this morning comes from the 6th chapter of Matthew, starting at verse 5 through 8. Well, I tell you what, we'll start at 6:1. Matthew 6:1. Beware of practicing your righteousness before men, to be noticed by them, otherwise you have no reward with your Father who is in heaven. So when you give to the poor, do not sound the trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogue and in the streets, so that they may be honored by men. Truly I say to you, they have their reward in full. But when you give to the poor, do not let your left hand know what the right hand is doing, so that your giving will be in secret. And your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. And when you pray, you are not to be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogue and on the street corners, so that they may be seen by men. Truly I say to you, they have their reward in full. But you, when you pray, go into your room and into your inner room, close your door and pray to your Father who is in heaven in secret. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And when you are praying, do not use meaningless repetition, as the Gentiles do, for they suppose that they will be heard for their many words. So do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask Him. And the prayer, the Lord's Prayer, as we have already done this morning, was given. And as the video. And we're going to be doing more of the video type stuff in the mornings with preparation for the service and playing that for about five or so minutes or more prior to the service starting. So we're going to move in that direction. I said to you just then, it says when you pray, go into your inner closet or a room and close the door and pray to your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. He's saying, do not put on exhibition. Don't make a big deal out of it. Don't make a big show out of your giving or your praying. And that follows with the giving. Beware of practicing your righteousness before men, to be noticed by them. Otherwise, you have no reward with your Father who is in heaven. So when you give to the poor, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be honored by men. You know, there's a parallel here. There's a fine line here in many respects. For you see, the first thing is we should never do things for our own benefit. We should never do it for show. Whatever we do for the Lord, it shouldn't be for show. But on the other hand, there's this other line that goes there. You have to do in public, and you have to show that you've done in order for others to know that that's the way you do it. So it's a fine line. It's important that Will or the girls or the other children when they're here, it's important. It would be great if they could be down here and see the offering. Because, you know, they have a tendency to think that the offering the church just has money. But if they could see people giving and put their money, 5 cents, 10 cents, I don't care what it is, see it put in the offering plate, makes a difference. So, in a sense, I learned a word in seminary, I didn't learn the word in seminary, but being existential. You know, we can talk about playing football, But until you get down on the field and play football, you don't really understand it. You don't really see it. You don't feel how vicious it is, David, do you? There was some advice I gave to a friend of mine a few years ago. And he was taking the course under me at Bruton Parker, and later on this friend became a Methodist minister. And just a wonderful guy. He knew that I had been bivocational for a number of years, many years. I had been a pastor for many years too. But he knew that I had been bivocational and I was mental health. And he said, I'd like to go back to school and get my degree. And I said, well, all you have to do is get in the car with me every day and I'll carry you down there. And he did. He finished that. He went on to Emory and finished that. Now he's retired from that. I just showed you. He's retired, but he's still doing the Lord's work. But I told Tommy, I gave Tommy some advice. I said, Tommy, how do you go, he was asking me how do I get people in the church motivated. And I said, well, Tommy, the way I've always done it is I try to do whatever job is there. And maybe somebody want to do that job. I remember a church I had that I cut the grass every week. And I mean, I was a big lawn. I did it all by myself. We had a lot of people in that church. And I was hoping one day that somebody would say, well, I'll cut the grass. But not a soul ever did. And I told Tommy, I said, you got to set the example. And he said he saw me a while back, and several times, and many times he's seen me and said, well, I tried your advice and it didn't work. I said, it hadn't worked for me either, so don't. But it still will do you some good. It'll make you feel that you've done all that you can do. There's one strong message that Jesus was trying to get across to his disciples, and that is we need time alone. We need time alone. It's tough trying to talk to God when you got so much background stuff going on. When I asked Whit one time, I said, Whit, and I've said this to you before, I said, Whit, where do you go study? And he says, Daddy, he says, I go to the University of Oklahoma library, and I go in the cellar, literally in the cellar. Down in the bottom of the library, he said the lights are dim, but he says there's a lot of cubicles down there, and I can sit down. There's no noise. Nobody's talking to us. Nobody goes down there. Unless you have a soundproof room, not even a closet that is soundproof, you will be able to communicate with God in sometimes. Because I'm going to tell you, when you are in a low emotionally, and when you have a life-changing decision to make, you want to be alone, but that mind keeps working, doesn't it? You can't shut it off. You can't make it quiet. I know I can't sleep at night. I'll stay up. It'd be unreal. And I'll start reading and studying at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning sometimes. And then I'll try to get up at a decent time. But I might as well get up because my mind won't shut off. I can say, boy, I'm going to stop thinking about this and I'm going to go to sleep. But 3 hours later, I'm just as wide awake. And I said, well, I'm wasting my time now. I'm just going to get up and do some Hebrew, or I'm going to do something. I'm going to start reading something. I was asked to be on a panel on suicide in Milledgeville, and to be one of the panelists. And I knew I had some material. Another morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, I was going through boxes trying to find some materials that I used in the garden, because I was the one appointed to look after the program for suicide and to deal with suicidals people who were possibly suicidal. But it's hard to do. I think the Bible should be called, in some way it could be entitled, Encounters in the Wilderness. Because so many of the things are done in a wilderness setting. There are three of the most important people in all of the Bible. Their experiences were in the wilderness. When they were having a life-changing experience. Now I'm using wilderness as a closet. They were off in the wilderness. We read first about Moses. His escape from Egypt, long before the children of Israel had their exile, or the exile of the children, he left for two reasons. Number one, he had killed an Egyptian taskmaster. And then he thought he had gotten away with it. He buried the person, he buried the taskmaster under sand, and he looked around and there was nobody there, and so he thought he'd gotten away with it. The next day, we were told, he saw two men fighting, and two of his own people fighting. And one of them said to Moses, said, "Do you mean to kill me like you killed the Egyptian?" And that scared Moses to death. Because now Moses realized that everybody knew about the killing. The word would pass around quickly. Now he took a flight, he went to Midian, and there he met his future wife. There he went to work for his father-in-law as a shepherd. But Moses it was an ideal job for Moses because it was an opportunity for Moses to be by himself, to think, to pray, to look at the future. One day while tending the sheep on Mount Horeb, he witnessed a bush that was burning, and he looked over at it, and the bush continued to burn, but it wasn't consumed. A voice came to him and says, "Do not come near. Take off your shoes from your feet. The place on which you are standing is holy ground." And after getting Moses' attention, God said, "I have seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt." Now Moses could have very easily piped up, "Well, you don't know half of it, Lord. I've been there. I was in the midst of it. I know what was going on there." But Moses was afraid. He was afraid to go back to his own people because they knew what he had done. Here's the killer coming back. He was also afraid of Pharaoh because he had killed an Egyptian. But God knew the leadership skills of Moses. And I want to tell you something. I don't care what you've done. God knows who you are. But Moses said, "Lord, I can't do it." And he was talking about his speech impediment, his inability to speak. And God said to him, "Come, I will send you to Pharaoh that you may bring my people, forth my people." He heard all the excuses Moses could give, but Moses said, "Who am I? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" And then God replied to him, he said, "I will be with you." When God gives us a task, I can assure you, He will always be there to help you. You may let Him down, but He's not going to let you down. He's going to be there. And He knew that he assured the disciples, "I will be with you to the end of time, to the end of the ages," in the Great Commission. The bottom line is that God knew Moses better than Moses knew Moses. God gives us strength during our times of weakness. And before God could use Moses, though, God had to get Moses alone. He needed to be by himself so he could hear God. Hundreds of years later, there was a man by the name of Paul. He had to go into the wilderness of Arabia before he could do the job that God had called him to do. Paul, as Moses, was in the killing business. Both of them were killers. Or at least Paul was he witnessed a killing, and he was for that killing, the stoning of Stephen. And he was on his way to Damascus, and probably if he had needed to kill there, he would have killed. But he was there to capture those Christians who were going against the faith that he loved so much. After being struck down on the Damascus road and requiring a physical assistance to make the trip on to Damascus, he would hear and he would say, I did not confer, I did not talk to with any human being, nor did I go up to Jerusalem to see those who were apostles before I was, but I went away to Arabia. You know, he was afraid of the doubts that people had. He was afraid of the Pharaohs, which is James and John and the head of the church. He had his doubts. It took him years to get to where he could go back and face the people of the Christians. And these are people that he was facing that he had killed their children, he had killed their family members, or he had been a part of it, or led it. So it took a lot for Paul to go back. So during this time he was preparing to go back, just like Moses took 40 years for him to go back. Paul is preparing to go back. You know, and he went into the most desolate area that you can name. I mean, he was between Damascus and the Dead Sea, all that area in there. And we know that, from what I understand, the valley there, where the I may be calling this wrong, Rift Valley, where the Dead Sea is the lowest place on the face of the earth. I mean, that's on the face of the earth, not in the water. Now, in the water, places are much deeper than that. I can sure, but that's what I've been told. But during Paul's closet experience, he had no library. He had no books. He had nothing but simply saying, meeting God and meeting himself. He had to talk to himself. Who am I? What do I believe? There's no wilderness experience so as that stands out any more, any greater than this one that of Jesus. You know, he was a man. He was a man. He had to spend time with his heavenly Father. I mean, if he were a person, a man, or a human being, he knew that he needed to be with God. And he was all man as well as all God. But he was suffered, as in Hebrews says, as you and I suffer. So he needed to be with his heavenly Father. He wanted to talk to God about what the task was set before him, what he needed to do. We all encounter the Satan in us. Jesus encountered Satan in the wilderness. That's something Moses didn't encounter. That's something Paul didn't encounter. But Jesus encountered Satan, that evil one, Lucifer, whatever you want to call him. Sometimes we need to be called Satan. And I know I have probably called Angela Ann Witt and Sharon, you devil. Because we all are devils. What did Peter say? What did Jesus say to Peter? Get thee behind me, Satan. Because we all cause people to fall. And what Peter was trying to do is keep Jesus from doing the job that he was called to do. In Greek, the word for tempt is not like the word in English. In English, when we say a person is tempted, it has a bad meaning, a connotation with it. It always means doing something wrong or seducing a person to do wrong. That's the way we look at it in English, don't we? In English language. In Greek, it has a entirely different meaning, or it means to test, tempt. It means to test, far more than it means to tempt. And the Jews had a saying, it goes like this: the Holy One, blessed be his name, does not elevate a man to dignity till he has first tried and searched him. And if he stands in temptation, then he raises him in dignity. The bottom line is, what we call temptation is not meant to make us sin. It's to make us stronger. Jesus, as I said, was in the wilderness at Jasmine. And Jasmine means devastation. If you've ever been in that part of the country, and as Sharon and I studied there, and I went to school there and all that, I want to tell you something. It is devastation. There is nothing in there. I mean, it's barren. At 15 miles by 35 miles by 15 miles it's devastation. I mean, you can't get out on the face of the earth. He could have gone. That would have been much more difficult to be in. It was a quiet, other than hearing some wild animals occasionally, it was a quiet place. But Jesus was alone. He had an opportunity to talk to himself. He had an opportunity to talk to God, to make up his mind how he was going to conduct his ministry over the next 3 years. It may well be the reason we so often go wrong is because we never seek to be with God, and we need to sit and be alone. We all need to be alone from the world so we can talk to ourselves and we can talk to God. Sometimes we think that about just how rotten we are. I'm telling you, I'm rotten to the core. I've had my ways. And Sharon gets on to me if I go into a restaurant. I did it the other night, and she said, "Wayne, I don't like that." They said they only had Pepsi. And I said, "Well, I don't want a dead Coca-Cola. Give me coffee." She said, "It's the way you said it." Because I said, "Oh well, I just have a hard time with Pepsi. I don't want it." We are rotten to the core. In many ways, we're rotten to our wives. We're rotten to our children. We're rotten to our husbands. And the question is, do you ever look at yourself? Do you ever ask yourself, why am I the way I am? Why do everything seems to fall apart on me in my life? Why? And you have to ask yourself and look at yourself in the mirror and say, who am I? Am I my worst enemy? You need to get along by yourself. And we need to follow the prescription that God gave us. Be still and know that I am God. We need to go into the closet, be by ourselves, and look at ourselves and see just how rotten we really are, why we have as many problems as we have in life. Today, you've got an opportunity to say, Lord, I want to change the way I've done things. But you might want to go in your closet first. But you've got an opportunity today. You can't walk out here and say, well, it's everybody else's fault. The reason people don't come to church is everybody else they're just lazy. We're lazy because we don't get out there and ask and bring people to church and beg them to come to church or lead them to Christ. That's our fault. and they see the way, how rotten we are sometimes, that's the reason they don't want to come to church. But as I always say, if you say all the hypocrites in church, I'll say, well, where do you want them? Where can they best be? I want all the hypocrites in church, because at least they got a way that can be helped. Today, we need to look at ourselves, look at what we're going to be doing. On our jobs, it doesn't matter where we are. Look at how I have been and who I am, Lord. We open the doors of church for you to make a decision.